This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The former Serbian leader Radovan Karavic, who was accused of committing genocide by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, will stand trial soon at The Hague. The full indictment will be read out to him. More details in the following report by Al Arabiya correspondent Noor El-Din Al-Faridi.
In a few seconds, the course of international justice will begin, after being long waited by the victims of ethnic cleansing in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is the first appearance by the main defendant, Radovan Karavic, after having shaved his long beard and hair, which he had used as a disguise when he practiced alternative medicine. Karavic waived his right to counsel for the hearing and said that he would do so for the whole trial.
The judge presided over today's session. The defendant will make his first appearance in court. The judge will make sure that Karadzic obtains his rights and that he understands the charges made against him and the terminologies of these accusations. The defendant will be given a chance to defend himself. The prosecutor will not significantly intervene in the first session.
A 17-page summary of the indictment will be read out to Radovan Karavic. The summary focuses on the genocide and the displacement of innocent civilians, as well as attacking United Nations forces and using them as human shields during the war in Bosnia. This shows that the charges are complicated and that the trial will be complex.
He has to be linked. We will try to prove that the defendant is responsible for the crimes that were mentioned in the indictment. We will not only provide evidence for the crimes that were committed, we will also provide evidence showing that he was responsible for what happened.
Following the lead of his mentor, the former Serbian prisoner who died in custody, Karadzic will use the court as a platform to cast doubts on its legitimacy. The court judges have long experience in questioning defendants in the war crime cases that were committed in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The trial of Radovan Karavic may provide clues for the trials of dozens of other defendants. Noor El-Din Al-Faridi, Al Arabiya, The Hague.
تواصل القوات العراقية بمساندة قوات أمريكية عملياتها.
Backed by the American forces, the Iraqi forces continued the military operation in Diyala in pursuit of al-Qaeda fighters and what the government calls outlaws.
The Iraqi army said that they have arrested dozens of wanted individuals and that they have a list of 5,000 wanted individuals, including members of the Diyala City Council.
For the second consecutive day, Iraqi forces backed by the American army continued their military operation in the Diyala province dubbed Omens of Prosperity. The operation's objective is to pursue armed groups and so-called outlaws. The operation, which will take place in the last strongholds of al-Qaeda in Iraq, was planned to be decisive and final. Previous military operations have failed to get rid of al-Qaeda, which explains the large number of attacks and explosions. Many suicide operations were carried out in Diyala by women, killing hundreds of Iraqis, the last of which took place in the middle of last month, killing more than 80 people. According to official reports, more than 20 suicide operations took place in Diyala. Within the framework of this operation, about 50,000 soldiers are searching for armed groups using intelligence information. The Iraqi army said that they have a list of 5,000 wanted individuals, including members of the Diyala City Council and police officers who are accused of cooperating with armed groups or militias. So far, the army has arrested dozens of wanted individuals, including a colonel.
At the present time, the army units are carrying out their duties by searching for wanted individuals and weapons in these villages. They are also looking for caches. Some of the wanted individuals were found and arrested.
One of the military operations' objectives is to stop the smuggling of weapons from Iran, which is accused by Washington of providing armed groups with weapons and explosives. Officials in the Diyala province said that the operation will last 4 weeks, which is the length of time needed to establish the rule of law in all of the Diyala provinces.
The Iraqi police said that 3 of its members were killed and 4 others were injured in a suicide explosion caused by a booby-trapped vehicle which targeted a police station in El Qiyada town of South Mosul. According to the police, the explosion caused huge losses in the police station and the wounded were transported to the town's hospital.
How can Iraqi officials sleep well on their soft pillows as their people are suffering from poverty? The government believes that evicting Iraqi families who are forced to live in abandoned homes will solve the problem of displaced Iraqis. But will throwing Iraqi families on the streets without providing them with alternative homes solve the problem? The following report by Rula Al-Tamar sheds light on this issue.
During the past 5 years, poverty and violence have forced thousands of Iraqi families to live in miserable camps where they build illegal homes on empty spaces that used to be military camps. Other families occupy empty homes in Baghdad's suburbs, most of which were owned by Iraqis who fled sectarian violence. Recently, the government gave a deadline for those who occupy the homes of others to hand over these homes to the government. This means that thousands of Iraqi families will have no homes, including the 11 family members of Mahdi Hassan, who has been living with his family in abandoned homes in the Rashid camp.
We want an alternative place to live. They should build us homes or apartments. We will accept anything. Where are these families going to go? Some of which have 15 or 20 members. We are living here without water or electricity. We have nothing. We want the government to have mercy.
According to a joint report by the United Nations and the World Bank, which was released in November of 2003, Iraq needs 1 to 1.5 million residential units. What makes the crisis more painful is the fact that the government is not providing the evicted families with alternative homes.
The water is insufficient. The electricity comes and goes. I can't say that we have no electricity, but it is inconsistent. We hope our government and officials help us to find alternative homes.
Aisha Naeem, who was evicted by the owner of the home where she was living in, along with her daughters, now lives in a 10 home in a Rashid camp.
I have 7 daughters. I have no son or anyone else to help me. Where can I go? Even if they were to give us some compensation, that would not help us. We need a home to live in. They can even give us a tent so we can stay inside. Where can we go? Just tell me, where can we go? We got rid of Saddam only to get a second Saddam.
Other displaced Iraqi families have better living conditions. They have moved into apartments that were previously occupied by members of the former regime. However, these families also received eviction notices.
We have no place to go. We have no money to pay rent. We're going to be forced to go on the street. Where else can we go? They will have to give us tents so we can live in them. Whoever they want to bring here, let them give me their previous home so I can live there.
According to the International Agency for Migration, millions of Iraqis who were forced to leave their homes due to violence are now struggling to obtain food, shelter, and basic services.
The camp of Ain al-Hilweh is in a state of cautious calm. According to the Palestinian and the Islamic forces, the disagreements could only be resolved by a political solution.
The security situation in the camp of Ain al-Hilweh in Sidon City has returned to the forefront after an assassination attempt was carried out against a Fatah official in the camp. Talal Muhammad Slim, nicknamed Talal the Jordanian, suffered various injuries and lost one of his eyes as a result of an explosive device. The The calmness after the incident did not reflect a stabilization of the security situation, where overnight a mortar shell exploded in the sky. This was followed by gunshots, which terrified the citizens. The investigation committee, formed by the Palestinian and Islamic forces, held a meeting and condemned the act and called on ending all signs of armament.
The situation in the camp is not isolated from the general situation in Lebanon. There is a state of instability in the region too, due to issues like the refugee problem and the schemes that target this issue. All these things have their repercussions. They reflect on and affect other matters. There cannot be a solution other than the political solution to this reality, regardless of the various disagreements that take place.
Al-Khattab advised keeping away from rumors and instigation, which would further complicate the matter.
A Somali family consisting of a grandmother and 5 children are living on the beach after a father was killed by a stray bullet and the mother disappeared. Abid Rahman Abdi reports from Mogadishu.
In this neighborhood overlooking the Indian Ocean, you find many tales of misery reflecting the problems facing the marine fishing sector in Mogadishu. Zainab Musa is the grandmother of these orphaned children, whose father was a fisherman who went one day on a fishing trip in the high sea but never came back. The father was killed by a stray bullet. After the death of her husband, the mother abandoned her family. She didn't even wait long enough to nurse her infant daughter. And since then, there's been no word of her whereabouts.
After her mother left her, I began breastfeeding her infant child. I must help these children who are in dire need of care and nursing.
I don't know where my mother went to, but I heard that she traveled abroad.
This room, which is lacking the basic accommodations of life, has been recently built with the help of donations collected by the neighbors. The family's old house was nothing but a hut that didn't protect them against the cold or heat.
We helped build this room, but unfortunately, we are unable to help the family meet its financial obligations.
Grandmother Zainab, the mother of the deceased fisherman, left her family in the Arabian desert and came here to look after her grandchildren with the help of these vegetable plants, which are not enough to satisfy a starving child's hunger. Abid Rahman Abdi, Al Arabiya.
اعتباراً من اليوم دخلت الحياة السياسية في إسرائيل مرحلة.
Today, the political life in Israel entered a new stage, and the call for early general elections next March is only part of it. The Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who failed to defend himself against charges of bribery and corruption, made a personal decision to end his political life. This comes after Olmert announced that he will not run in the Kadima primary elections next month. As preparations are intensifying to replace Olmert as the head of the Kadima party, Olmert's opponent and the head of the right wing, Benjamin Netanyahu, called for early general elections. Mohammed Al-Sayed reports from Jerusalem.
محمد السيد من القدس المحتلة.
I've decided not to run in the Kadima party primaries, which will take place as scheduled. I don't intend to intervene in these primaries and will accept the results.
بهذه الكلمات المفاجئة أدخل رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي إيهود أولمرت الحياة السياسية الإسرائيلية.
With these surprising words, the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert carried Israel's political life into a new stage, and until next March, when the country holds early elections, Olmert may remain in his position. Meanwhile, preparations to find a successor for Olmert are intensifying, despite the difficulties that may face the winner of the primaries, which are set to take place next month.
The possibility of forming a replacement government led by Foreign Minister Zipi Livni or Shaul Mufaz is not sound.
هذا أمر صعب للغاية لأن
I believe the only solution is to hold early elections.
31 months. This is how old Olmert's government is, which came after Ariel Sharon went into a deep coma. Today, Olmert is leaving the government after his defense collapsed in the face of mounting police investigations and a series of bribery and corruption cases. Olmert started to lose his popularity after the kidnapping of the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in Gaza and the kidnapping of the 2 Israeli soldiers 2 weeks later in Lebanon and the eruption of the July War in 2006.
The main reason was the defeat of Israel in 2006 by Hezbollah. Since then, the call for Olmert's resignation and for early elections began to gain momentum.
Olmert has ended the controversy over the future of his political life, and with it, he ended the Kadima party and opened the door widely for Benjamin Netanyahu to return to power in Israel. It seems that Netanyahu will come back with overwhelming support. Meanwhile, the Palestinians, since Oslo, are continuing to suffer the consequences of an Israeli partisan game. Mohammed Al-Sayed, Dubai TV, Ramallah.
Olmert's resignation is a defeat for Israel and a victory for Hamas. This is at least what the spokesman of Hamas, Sami Abu Zuhri, is saying in his first comment on the resignation of Ehud Olmert. Olmert will resign as the head of the Kadima party as soon as the party elects a successor in September.
The announcement by Olmert that he intends to resign is an indication of the deteriorating state of the Israeli occupation. Parallel to that, it's also an indication of the victory of Hamas and the Palestinian resistance and their perseverance regarding their unequivocal political principles. The announcement is a major blow to the Palestinian negotiation team, which committed itself to the consensus project and held hope on reaching a political deal during this year.
After he was shaken down by the Vinegrad report and toppled amidst the bribery charges facing him, Olmert decided to resign as the head of the Kadima party, raising questions about who may replace him. The latest public polls in Israel are showing 4 names competing for the position, with Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni topping the list. Livni is considered to be the strongest woman in Israel after Golda Meir, Israel's prime minister during the 70s. Israel's Interior Minister Meir Shachrit comes second on the list, followed by the Minister of National Security and Parliament member Avi Diktar. The 4th candidate on the list is Israel's Minister of Transportation, Shaul Mofaz, who is considered to be the most radical candidate representing the far right. Mofaz served as defense minister in 2002, and before then, he served as the chief of staff for the occupation's army.
هدنة إسرائيل مع حماس كتب لها أن تصمد في مواجهة كثير من
The truce between Hamas and Israel withstood many breaches. We don't know the secret behind this, nor do we know what each side harbors for the other. Can this truce last? The armed wings of the Palestinian factions have kept up their military preparedness. They are training as well as experimenting with and testing weapons and rockets. It's as if they are preparing for a possible war. The weapons of the Palestinian factions might end up as a bargaining chip during any phase of the Palestinian-Israeli negotiations, similar to the weapons of Hezbollah in Lebanon.
منح اتفاق التهدئة حركة حماس وإسرائيل وأطرافا إقليمية.
The state of calm provided Hamas, Israel, and the other regional players a chance to catch their breath after the relentless pressure and escalation in the besieged Gaza Strip. The state of calm is still in its initial weeks. It does not seem like Israel is planning aggression, but resistance factions have remained prepared. The military shields manufacturing units are busy preparing rockets, bombs, and powerful explosive devices and anti-tank missiles.
The Palestinian factions utilized this state of calm, which came after the truce with the Zionist enemy via Egyptian mediation. The Palestinian factions are at a new stage in their development and training in military operational methods and weaponry in all areas, specifically in what we refer to as the Missile Defense Alliance. We thank God for the excellent level that we have reached as a Palestinian resistance in spite of our primitive resources.
Hundreds of meters away from the borders, the members of the resistance are cradling their weapons. They declare the readiness of the factions in spite of being in a state of calm. Their groups have started vicious field maneuvers in their training centers. To them, the state of calm is a warrior's respite and a time to prepare for another round of resistance. If the occupation forces break the calm, the resistance will respond with ground-shaking and terrifying surprises.
We retrained the ground units and we created military courses in which we use live ammunition. This is to guarantee that the fighter on the ground is completely prepared to face the battle with the Zionist enemy. The Zionist enemy will see many surprises by the ground fighters who have received the greatest military training.
The military capabilities of factions have decreased. Their ground training now includes expanding the skill and aptitude of the fighters on many levels and all professional aspects. These resistance fighters have experience and skill to fight as individuals of groups. Their training includes physical training, aiming, shooting, sniping, and using anti-tank missiles.
The Palestinian factions and the Mujahideen of the Salah ad-Din victorious brigades have gained power on the ground during this time of calm. They all underwent military training, which began with physical training. They went through the theoretical lectures on the artillery they will use on the ground. Then they went into specific areas of field training, like sniping or rocket engineering. We also prepare them to train the civilian units to use all available weapons to face the Zionist enemy in any possible battle.
Distrust of the occupier keeps the fighters in a continuous state of alert. This is because the normal basis for the relationship between the resistance and the occupier is embodied only in confrontation, even if a fighter rests or stops to catch his breath. For Al Madar, this is Walid Abdul Rahman, Dubai TV, Gaza.
NAM Foreign Ministers Conference came to an end in Tehran late Wednesday. On the sidelines of the gathering, Iran's ambassador to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Ali Asghar Soltanieh, had this to say on Iran's peaceful nuclear program.
Non-aligned movement include 118 countries of the world. Unanimously supported Iran nuclear activities in a declaration which was even a step forward compared to the previous declaration in Havana. It means that non-aligned movement, the international community once again reiterated Iran's inalienable rights for peaceful uses of nuclear energy, to have activities in fuel cycle and enrichment, of course, or activities in this respect, and reiterated that there shouldn't be any undue pressure on the IAEA or interference, and IAEA is the only pertinent international organization. In fact, what happened in Geneva was a strong signal of Iran's determination for peaceful, negotiated solution for this. Now, this is United States or others to get this message, not to isolate themselves more.
Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, at least 3 people have been injured after a bomb exploded outside the Pakistani consulate in Herat. It comes as the Taliban continues to put pressure on the Afghan army and international forces. The man charged with stopping the insurgency is General David McKinnon. James Bay sat down with NATO's military chief to find out how the fight is faring.
General David McKinnon is the most senior US general in Afghanistan and commander of the 53,000-strong NATO-led International Security Assistance Force. He only took over the post 2 months ago, but already he says one of his biggest problems is Taliban infiltration from across the border in Pakistan.
We're in a period of increased violence especially in the southern and the eastern part of Afghanistan. That violence is associated with a syndicated insurgency. It's associated with a change in their tactics to smaller scale, more asymmetric attacks on targets that they feel are vulnerable, to include terrorist-type tactics. And it also largely emanates from tribal sanctuaries across the border in Pakistan that allow freedom of movement of insurgents into Afghanistan.
General McKinnon, you are wearing a NATO hat at the moment, but you're a US general, and after 9/11, your president said of Al-Qaeda, I'm going to hunt them down and we're going to smoke them out of their holes. How frustrating is it for you that there are Taliban and Al-Qaeda in sanctuaries, as you just said, on the other side of the border, but that part of the battlefield is a part of the battlefield you can't go to?
Well, as you correctly imply, my mandate as a NATO commander stops at the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now, you ask me, is it frustrating that organizations such as Al-Qaeda or the Taliban exist in sanctuaries across the border? Absolutely frustrating. It is a regional problem. It is a problem for Pakistan and the leadership in Pakistan. It is a problem for Afghanistan. And in the case of Al-Qaeda, it's a global frustration and a global problem.
Your predecessor, General Dan McNeill, said he had an under-resourced force. What's your view of what you have at your disposal?
My initial assessment is that that has not changed. We are under-resourced. We need more military capabilities, whether that's from the United States, whether it's from the coalition, or whether it's continuing to build the capacity and the capability of the Afghan army and police force. We need more security capability in Afghanistan to defeat this insurgency.
The general says he'll make every effort to persuade some NATO members to do more. Some countries, for example Germany, Italy and Spain, have so-called caveats in place, which means that their troops cannot be deployed to the most volatile areas in the south and east of Afghanistan. James Bayes, Al Jazeera.
I'm Amy Goodman, host of Democracy Now!, here to ask you for support for Mosaic, world news from the Middle East. You know, in media news, a new study shows that corporate news coverage of the Iraq War has dropped sharply in the last 4 months. According to the Project for Excellence in Journalism, the Iraq War accounted for just 15% of news coverage, 19% of the network evening newscasts. We need more coverage of the Middle East, not less. We are talking right now about living in a time of war, and it is up to us in a democratic society to decide what to do about that. Mosaic provides information from the Middle East, from countries in the Middle East, from a Middle Eastern perspective. It is invaluable. And right now they need $200,000 to continue their work, to continue their coverage, to bring you their fall lineup of this essential program. The number to call to make your pledge is 866-485-8848. That's 866-485-8848. You can also pledge online at linktv.org. Please pledge as much as you can. Information is power. When you have information, you are empowered to do something about it. That's what Mosaic provides. Again, they're trying to raise $200,000. In order to do this, you can be a small or large part of that. Pledge 25, pledge 50, pledge 200, pledge 500. Mosaic needs you. If you've needed Mosaic for information, now they're asking you to help them reach their goal. That number again is 866-485-8848. That's 866-485-8848. Make your pledge, make it now. You can also pledge online at linktv.org. That number is the lifeline for Mosaic. 866-485-8848. Make the call that makes the difference. This is viewer-sponsored media. You are the engine of this program. Mosaic provides a unique perspective from many different countries in the Middle East. Please give your support to independent media, 866-485-8848. And thanks so much.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.